Think you need 500 connections to be a great networker on LinkedIn? Think again. I'm Greg. I'm an introverted networker. And in this episode, I want to talk to you how to network without LinkedIn. I am a big proponent of LinkedIn. I've been on LinkedIn since 2005 was when I created my profile. It's really changed in 20 years. Can't believe a social media platform's been around for 20 years. Actually, it's been around longer because it started before 2005. That's just when I got on it. But so I've been on LinkedIn for 20 years. I'm a big advocate of it. The reason why I'm talking about this today is I posted this week about the people who are not on LinkedIn, where I do most of my posting, are the people who probably need to hear my advice the most. But they're not on LinkedIn, so they're not going to see it. So the point was there's a lot of people who need to read this post, but they won't because they're not on LinkedIn, or they don't get on LinkedIn very often. Actually, that's probably what the post was more about. Is there's a lot of people who go create LinkedIn profiles and then they just leave them. And then they show up when they're worried about losing their job, or when they've lost their job, or when they're on a job search. They show up on LinkedIn and then they expect to suddenly get all sorts of results. And they're hoping that recruiters are going to be calling them and people are going to be reaching out to them and offering them jobs. And then they're frustrated when that doesn't happen. And the point of this was you need to get active on the platform. You need to engage. You need to update your profile. You need to make sure that you're commenting and liking. You need to be posting. And honestly, a lot of people don't do that. I mean, a lot of people get on there, but only about 1% of the people that get on LinkedIn actually post something. Maybe 3% engage with a like or a comment, but most people just scroll past the posts and don't do anything. So my point with this was that people should be on LinkedIn to network. And what got me thinking about it was somebody left a comment because my post said something like, people don't have at least 500 connections. And the 500 number that's as many connections as LinkedIn will show. So once you have 500 connections, it won't show anything in your profile other than 500 connections to other people. So that tends to signal that you've exceeded 500. That's some signal that, hey, you are active on the platform. But it's not really a good metric, but that's what I said. And I was saying I'll look at people's profiles and it says they have less than 500 connections. So that lets me know they're either not connecting or they're not on the platform very often. Or maybe they're a new user. They just haven't grown their connections that much. And I had a commenter say, but is 500 connections really like the right number? Is that what we really care about? And I said, actually, that's a good point. That was a good call out and kind of grounded me more in thinking you don't have to have 500 connections to be an effective networker on LinkedIn. In fact, you don't have to have 100. Now, it's a good idea to have more because the more connections you have, the more people you're connected to, the more potential people you could get in touch with from a shared first degree connection. But it's not a good measure of whether somebody's on the platform or if they're active or not. So somebody could have a couple hundred connections and still be posting, engaging, and growing. Now, that being said, if you're active, what starts to happen is you start to get followers, and those start to show up. I don't know how I think connections are counted as followers, but not the other way around. But the whole point was, how do you tell if somebody's active on LinkedIn? And if they're not active, does that mean they're not networking, they're not using the platform? Or if they don't show the traditional signs of being active? So the signs are, do you have 500 or more connections? It just means you spend a lot of time connecting on LinkedIn. A better sign of whether somebody's active on LinkedIn is, do they have activity? So if you go on somebody's profile and you scroll down a little ways, you get down to a section that's called activity, and it shows posts and comments and other, things that you've contributed to the site. And so if you see people who are commenting and engaging and sharing posts and posting, That's the best measure because that shows they're actually active on LinkedIn. So that's actually the better measure, not how many connections or followers or anything somebody has. So my point here is you may be brand new to LinkedIn, or you haven't spent a lot of time there and you're just getting active and you don't have a lot of connections. And my point is, don't be frustrated with that. Don't feel like because you don't have a lot of connections that for some reason you're not doing a good job. I would say, what's more important is who are you connecting with or who are you following, right? So you can follow people and not connect with them. And that's a good strategy because you can see what they're going to post before you decide to connect with them. So you can certainly follow people, you can comment, you can like, you can share things. That's how you can network on LinkedIn without having 500 connections. And also, to those of us who have more, we shouldn't be judging people who don't have a lot of connections, because some people, I mean, if you take somebody who's brand new in their career, just start out maybe coming out of college, they're not going to have a ton of connections, but they could be a great networker. So the sign of good networking isn't all about numbers of connections. That should never be your focus. It certainly doesn't hurt to have more. It doesn't hurt to have, as long as they're quality, right? You don't want to just have connections for the sake of connections. You want to have quality connections that are contributing, that you're having dialogue with. So if you don't have 500 connections, don't worry about that. You can certainly be a great networker on LinkedIn and engage on LinkedIn with less. It's just a matter of how active are you? Are you getting on the platform? Which was kind of my whole point in the post anyways, that there's some people who only get on like every couple times a year, or maybe they just go look at it and they've got, I can understand it's probably overwhelming because they've got a lot of connection requests they've got to go through. They've probably got a lot of notifications. They've probably got all these random messages in their inbox from people trying to connect with them to sell stuff, and they're old. And so I can understand, you get on there, you get overwhelmed, and then you're like, oh, I don't want to get on LinkedIn. Obviously, if you get in on the platform all the time, you're going to see those things and work through them, and you're not going to have a big backlog. So those are the folks that I'm talking about, where they're never doing anything, and then they get on, they expect to go find a job, and then they get frustrated because it doesn't work out. But that's not the way social media platforms work. They work when you get on them and engage. So even if you don't have a lot of connections, getting on there regularly is going to solve that problem. Then I got another comment, and this is the second part of this, which was around a commenter who said, I would prefer to network locally and not network on LinkedIn. Now, of course, this was on LinkedIn. He's leaving this comment on LinkedIn, but I get it. People do it in different ways. There are a lot of people who run businesses and have their careers just by connecting locally in their city with people in their industry. Most of those people are going to be doing that through events. They're going to go to events and meet people, or they have regular professional meetings that they go to meet with people and connect with people, or they have other community organizations where they network and meet with people. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I certainly don't hold that against people. It's a great way to network. And a lot of the principles that I talk about in this podcast, in the newsletter, in my book, everything I've done, allow you to network without LinkedIn. It certainly makes it easier. But again, if local is your goal and you maybe live in a more rural place, or you don't live in a big city, LinkedIn's not going to be a great tool for you. You're not going to find a lot of people that way if you're trying to work locally. So you are going to have to go to other places. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use electronic methods to do it. You can use email. You can email people you know, and those people may be around you to get back in touch with them. You can email people you used to work with. Again, if you worked at a company in a city and a lot of people worked at that company, you probably know a bunch of them. They went to work somewhere else. You can certainly track them down and find them. You could use other social media. You could use Facebook. You could use Twitter. You can use Blue Sky. You can use Instagram. You can use any kind of electronic medium to get in touch with people. It doesn't have to be LinkedIn. And even if you don't use any of those, again, the whole goal of everything I talk about with networking is to have real in-person conversations. So let's say you're totally like, I'm off social media, I don't have anything, I just want to have in-person conversations. Okay, you can set those up without any of those social media platforms. So again, reconnecting with your dormant ties, getting connected with people and having coffee, having lunch, just having a phone call. I mean, a good old fashioned 15-minute phone call, voice to voice conversation is sometimes what you need to do to create that connection and go from there. So you can totally do that. Then you're going to have these conversations where you're listening to what other people are saying, you're helping them out, you're trying to give them something of value. When they say, how can I help you? You make it easy to help, and you just keep doing this as a habit. You have a little habit where each day you're taking one step, one action to make one connection. And you don't need LinkedIn for any of that. So in reality, you don't have to have LinkedIn to network. And I would argue having LinkedIn and being active on LinkedIn is not in and of itself networking. So for all those people who get on there every day, like me and a lot of people I know, we're on there constantly connecting and engaging and commenting and talking to people. But if I don't take some of those online conversations and turn them into real life conversations, that's not really networking. You can have a bunch of connections, you can have a bunch of followers, you can have a bunch of people commenting on stuff, a bunch of comment conversations, but you don't really know those people. And you might trust them because you see them every day, but you're probably not going to do a lot of work with them until you've had more of a conversation with them. And you might not recommend them to get hired by somebody you know, or ask them to recommend you unless you had more of those conversations. So again, just the act of being on LinkedIn is not networking. There's more to it. And on the other hand, you can totally network without LinkedIn. And a lot of the steps that I talk about will help you do that. So the last part of this that I want to talk about is if you work for a company, because this comes up a lot, and I saw this in a couple of places on LinkedIn this week. If you work somewhere and you have employees and you see that they're on LinkedIn, you should encourage that. Many managers, or at least many employees, I would say, many employees are afraid of their leader, their manager, seeing them on LinkedIn or on social media talking about work. We're going to say LinkedIn because most people don't talk about Instagram or Facebook about work. If they are, it's probably not a good thing, and definitely not on Twitter or some of those others. I think on LinkedIn, people try to keep it more professional because they think, yeah, my boss may see this. At the same time, if you're the boss, you should encourage your employees to be active on LinkedIn. You should encourage your employees to be actively networking. And a lot of people will hear that and they'll be like, why would I do that? They're going to go find another job. If that's your worry, you're a little insecure as a boss. You honestly don't think they like working for you. That's what you're saying, basically, because you're worried they're going to find a better job. If that's not the case, why wouldn't you want them to be out there learning from other people, making connections within your industry or in other industries to learn about what other people are doing, to make connections, to potentially find great people to come join your team? Because if they're out there and they're meeting people and they're like, this person would be great for our team, that's a great way to get talent in your organization, is to have people, your employees out there bringing people in. It's a bit like the employee referral program, which is one of the best sources of talent for most companies, is when their employees refer others. So usually that's their friends or somebody they worked with before. But what if they were out there looking for new talent and they were meeting them on LinkedIn and connecting and bringing them in? That would certainly drive down your recruiting costs. It would bring in better talent, make your organization stronger. And then there's the inevitable idea of, okay, maybe they do find a better job, but then you stay connected with them, you network with them, they go somewhere else for a couple of years, get some additional skills, and come back and you hire them back, and again, pay them appropriately for those new skills. But that boomerang situation, if you want to talk about a loyal employee, somebody who's left and comes back is probably never going to leave you again. Not for a long time. I mean, they might leave at some point, but they're going to be with you for a while, and you're not going to have to worry about them because they've gone out and seen what's out there, and now they're coming back. But that only happens if you encourage them to network. It only happens if you yourself stay networked with them and in touch with them. And instead of being upset if they leave, you keep the door open for them to come back. That boomerang scenario, I know a head of HR in town that is a friend of mine that I regularly talk to, who says his company actively tracks their alumni employees. Their employees leave, they stay in touch with them, they keep the door open for them, and those employees come back, and they have a bunch of people that come back. And he said once they come back, they're our highest performers, they're our lowest retention risks, they're the ones that are going to stick with us, and they're great because they've gone out and seen what's out there, and they know they're not going to get a better spot. Be open to that kind of stuff. So your employees should not get the impression that it's bad to be networking on LinkedIn. You should encourage it. In fact, you should teach them to be better networkers, because when they're better networkers, they're not only going to help you as their manager, because they're going to be better team members, they're going to solve problems, but they're going to make the company stronger by bringing people in, bringing in knowledge. Those are a few of the things I saw on LinkedIn this week. Again, people who are not necessarily active in the traditional ways on LinkedIn might still be great networkers or be actively engaged on the program. On the platform. Also, that you don't have to be on LinkedIn to network. So going back to this whole idea of managers like worried that people are going to leave because they're on LinkedIn, you've probably got some people that are networking and aren't on LinkedIn and you don't even know it. Which again is fine, but if you're worried about them leaving, they're going to leave whether they're on LinkedIn or not. So you should encourage them to do that. So really just talking about LinkedIn, how to network on it, and some of the things you should think about. Really think about what it means and what it's for and how to use it the best way, and also what you can do to encourage other people to be more effective in networking. Of course, if you need help with networking, I'm here. You know where to find me. I'm on this podcast. I'm on this video podcast, the newsletter, LinkedIn. You can find me if you're having challenges with it, or if you want to talk about this idea of like, hey, how can I teach my employees to be better networkers? And why would I do that? To be honest, I can tell you all the reasons backed up with research why it's in your best interest to teach your employees to be better networkers. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you more about that, find out if it's the right solution for you and your company. But if you're just an individual who's looking to network, you have all of my information here. It's always here. Happy to help. Remember, go out this week, meet some interesting people, and remember, always be connecting.